The morning smelled different. That was the first thing I noticed, before my eyes opened, before my body remembered the weight of the blankets or the particular softness of the mattress beneath me. The scent hit me like a slow tide, something warm and deep, rolling through the room, threading itself into my chest, and pulling at something ancient and instinctive. I lay still for a long moment, suspended between sleep and waking, trying to name what I was breathing in. It was me, but it was not only me. There was something else wound into my own familiar scent, something sweeter, something that bloomed at the edges of my usual warmth, like a flower opening in a place it had never grown before. My hand found my own stomach in the darkness of half-sleep, pressing flat against the soft skin there, and I felt nothing unusual, no change, nothing visible. And yet the scent rose from my skin like a declaration, like a flag planted in soil that had just been claimed. I sat up slowly. The room was still gray with early morning light. The curtains we had hung together, the deep navy ones Luther had insisted on because he said he needed complete darkness to sleep, which was an absolute lie since the man woke at sunrise every single day without fail, filtered the dim glow of a world not yet fully awake. I could hear birds somewhere distant. I could hear my own heartbeat, and I could smell that impossible sweetness. My name is Chris Rice. I am 24 years old. I am an Omega, which is something I spent a significant portion of my early life resenting with a fury that could have powered a small city. I grew up in a world that had opinions about what Omegas were supposed to be: soft-voiced, home-kept, grateful for attention, content with smallness. I was none of those things. I was loud. I was ambitious. I studied environmental science and argued with professors twice my age. I wore my designation like a chip on my shoulder for years, daring anyone to underestimate me because of it. And then I met Luther Drake, and things became considerably more complicated. Luther is an alpha. He is also the single most infuriating, most impossibly gentle, most devastatingly beautiful human being I have ever encountered, and I say that as someone who has dedicated years of my life to resenting exactly the kind of person he appears to be on the surface. He is tall. He is broad-shouldered in a way that makes door frames seem like a reasonable width for the world. He has dark eyes that catch light the way deep water does, holding it, changing its color, giving it back as something transformed. He has a scar beneath his left jaw from an accident he refuses to fully explain, and a laugh that comes from somewhere low in his chest and takes its time arriving at his face. He is also, and I cannot stress this enough, asleep beside me right now. Completely unconscious, one arm flung over his face, snoring very quietly in a way he would deny if confronted with evidence. We have been mated for 11 months. We have been together for 2.5 years before that. In the early days, I told my best friend Dane that I was not falling for Luther Drake. I told him this repeatedly and with great conviction. I told him this while checking my phone for messages, while rereading the same texts 3 times, while showing up 40 minutes early to things I knew Luther would also attend. Dane, who has the patience of a very tired saint, listened to all of this and said nothing, which is its own form of eloquence. But this morning, this scent, this was something new. I slipped out of bed carefully, unwilling to wake Luther yet. My bare feet found the cool floor, and I padded to the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror and breathed in again, deeply, pressing my nose to my own wrist the way an animal might, following the scent to its source. It was there, undeniable, warm and layered and strange, and somehow, joyful was the word that came to mind, which felt ridiculous, because scents could not be joyful, and yet that was precisely what it was. A joyfulness buried in chemistry. I stared at my own face for a long time. My reflection looked the same. Dark circles I had been carrying for weeks. Skin that tended toward warm brown in summer and somewhat paler in winter. Hair going in several unhelpful directions. Were those my eyes? I leaned closer. Were they slightly different? Was there something in them I had not seen before? Some quality, some new occupancy? I pressed my hand to my stomach again. Nothing. Smooth skin. The normal rise and fall of breathing. And yet, I reached under the sink where the first aid kit lived alongside the miscellaneous items that accumulate in any shared bathroom. Spare toothbrushes, 3 kinds of shampoo, a tube of something Luther had bought claiming it was good for muscle soreness and then never used. Behind all of that, I had placed a box 3 weeks ago. I had placed it there and then ignored it with extreme determination, because acknowledging it would have meant allowing the possibility it represented to take up space in my mind, and I was not ready for that. I was not sure I was ready now either, but my hands were already on the box. I did not take the test immediately. I set it on the edge of the sink, looked at it, and then went and put the kettle on, because making tea is what I do when the world becomes too loud to process. It is a habit inherited from a grandmother who believed tea could address most crises and whiskey could handle the rest. And while I had inherited both beliefs, tea seemed more appropriate for 6 in the morning. The kitchen was quiet. The flat we shared was small, but arranged cleverly. Luther had a gift for space that I had never expected, a quiet understanding of how rooms breathed. He had hung plants in the kitchen window. He had found a second-hand table that somehow fit exactly right in the corner where a table needed to be. He had, over the course of our years together, done 1,000 small things to make spaces feel inhabited and warm. And it still occasionally startled me, still occasionally made me stop in the middle of a room and feel something so large it had no proper name. I wrapped both hands around my mug. I breathed in the steam. The scent was still there. My own scent, transformed. Sweeter, deeper, something nesting inside me that had not been there before. Luther moved through the flat the way all alphas do at home, not the contained, careful way he moved in public, where he was always aware of how his presence registered, always pulling himself back slightly at the edges. Here, he moved freely. His footsteps were unhurried and large. He came into the kitchen and immediately went for the mug cabinet, and I watched him in the peripheral way I had been watching him for years. That sideways, soft focus attention that I could always deny if necessary. He poured his coffee, added the obnoxious amount of sugar he refused to apologize for, turned around, and stopped. His nostrils flared. Not dramatically. Luther did very little dramatically, but I saw it. A subtle expansion. A stillness that came over his whole body, the way a forest goes quiet when something changes in the air. His eyes found mine. Dark eyes, holding light, holding something else now, something that was working very hard to remain calm and was not entirely succeeding. Chris. His voice was still rough with sleep, low and careful, and he said my name the way he always said it, like it was the truest word he knew. I know, I said. A pause, a long one. He set down his coffee without looking away from me. When did you? This morning, just now. The scent. He crossed the kitchen in 3 steps, which was all it took given the kitchen's dimensions, and stood in front of me. He was still in the soft worn shirt he slept in, and his hair was doing something architectural without his knowledge. And he looked at me with those dark eyes that were currently performing an extraordinary amount of emotional labor. He reached out and touched my face. Just that. One hand curved along my jaw, his thumb brushing my cheekbone, his attention moving over my face like he was reading something written there. You haven't tested yet, he said. It was not a question. He knew me well enough to know that I would have come and woken him immediately if I had, that I would not have been sitting here quietly with my tea if there had already been confirmation. There's a test in the bathroom, I admitted. Something moved through his expression, something enormous and carefully restrained, something that lived in the space between hope and terror, and the particular reverence that belongs to moments you have imagined but never quite let yourself fully believe. Okay, he said. Just that. Steady, present, his hand still on my face. I'm nervous, I said, and it came out smaller than I intended. I know. He moved his thumb again, slow and deliberate. I am too. We stood in the kitchen in the early morning light for another minute, his hand on my face and my hands around my mug, and the scent of something new and impossible rising between us. Then I set down my tea, and he took his hand back, and gave me space as he always did, never crowding, always there, and I walked down the hallway to the bathroom. He waited in the kitchen. I heard him pick up his coffee again. I heard the quiet sounds of the flat around us, the small domestic noises of a life built together. I closed the bathroom door, not all the way, just most of the way, which was a distinction that felt important. I picked up the box. While I waited, the 3 minutes stretching out like taffy, I found myself thinking about the beginning. I met Luther Drake at a municipal environmental planning meeting, which is exactly the kind of place where you expect to meet an infuriating person. It was a public comment session about proposed development on a wetland area at the edge of the city, and I had gone because the local conservation group I volunteered with needed representation, and I had gone armed with data and a speech I had refined over several days. Luther was there representing a land development consultancy. He was also, immediately and obviously, an alpha. And not the subtle kind. He had that alpha quality that some people carry like a held breath, a contained pressure, a density of presence that you can feel from across a room. I clocked him in the first 30 seconds and filed him under the relevant category and prepared to be annoyed by everything he said. And then he opened his mouth and disagreed with his own clients. He stood at the podium. He had gone before me, which meant I had been watching him and composing counter-arguments for 10 minutes, and he laid out the development company's proposal clearly and concisely. And then he said, in the same measured voice, that he had significant concerns about the eastern section of the proposal, and that the wetland buffer zone they were planning to eliminate was providing stormwater services to 3 downstream neighborhoods, and that he believed a revised plan was necessary before the project could responsibly proceed. The room went very quiet. The representatives from the development company, who were seated to his left, went a particular shade of red that clashed with their ties. I stood up when it was my turn and made my own case, and I was thorough, and I did not soften any of it. And when I sat down, I did not look at him. After the meeting, he came and found me in the parking lot. Your data on the invertebrate population was better than ours, he said, by way of introduction, standing slightly back so as not to crowd me, which I noted with reluctant approval. We missed the secondary nesting habitat entirely. You did, I agreed, not particularly warmly. I'd like to share your report with the team, with your permission. Formally, with attribution. I looked at him for a long moment. Alphas who openly admitted they had missed something and asked permission, rather than simply appropriating, were not common enough. My grandmother would have said something like that, was worth at least 1 minute of good faith. Send me a data sharing agreement by Friday, I said. I'll review it. He sent it by Wednesday. It was thorough, well drafted, and included a clause granting me approval rights over any derivative material. I stared at that clause for a while before signing. The project ended with a revised development plan that preserved the wetland buffer. It was reported in 2 local papers. Luther's name was in the first paragraph, mine was in the second. I told myself that was not satisfying. I was lying. He took me to dinner 6 weeks later, which should have felt like a big thing, but somehow felt like the continuation of a conversation we had already been having. He was careful over dinner, careful in the way that thoughtful alphas are when they know their presence has weight and are making active choices about how to carry it. He asked questions and listened to the answers. He pushed back when he disagreed, which he did twice, both times specifically and on points where I could see his reasoning. He walked me to my car afterward and said he had had a good time, and he would like to see me again if I was interested. And he said it plainly, without performing confidence at me, without the artificial ease that some alphas deploy like a weapon. I said I was interested. In the car on the way home, I called Dane. I think I might be in a lot of trouble, I told him. Yes, Dane said with enormous satisfaction. You are. The first time I experienced a heat cycle while we were together, about 4 months in, I was frightened in a way I had not been since I was 17. Not frightened of the heat itself. I had managed those alone for years with irrelevant suppressants and blockers. Frightened of needing someone. Frightened of needing Luther specifically, of letting him into that vulnerable and overwhelming space where my body essentially declared its own agenda without consulting me. I called him from the floor of my apartment bathroom, which is not where I had planned to be when I made this call. It's coming early, I said, my voice already too warm, already altered by the beginning of it. My blockers ran out last week, and I ordered more, but they're not here yet. A pause, then very calmly, what do you need from me? Not, I'm coming over, not, I'll handle it, not any of the presumptuous proprietary things that an alpha in that moment might easily have said. What do you need from me? I squeezed my eyes shut. I don't know, I admitted. I've always done these alone. We can still do that, he said immediately. I can arrange for someone to bring supplies. I can stay outside. I can call every hour if that would help. Whatever you need, Chris. Or, I said, and my voice broke slightly on the word, and I hated it, and I kept going anyway. Or you could come. The silence on his end lasted exactly 3 seconds. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He was there in 15. He brought electrolyte drinks and the specific brand of dark chocolate I had mentioned once in passing 3 months earlier, and apparently he had filed away. He sat with me through the worst of it, with a patience and a steadiness that were almost unbearable in their gentleness. He never made me feel watched or studied or reduced. He held my hand when I asked him to, and gave me space when I needed that instead. At some point in the long blur of it, I cried, which I resented, and he didn't say anything about it, which was exactly right. I hate meeting things, I told him much later when it was mostly over and I was exhausted in the boneless way that follows a heat cycle. I know, he said. It's not about you specifically. I know that too. I'm still going to be difficult about it. Chris. He looked at me, and there was something in his face that was so steady, so entirely without judgment, that it made my chest hurt. You're allowed to be however you are. I'm not here for an easier version of you. I thought about that for a long time. We had talked about children. We had talked about it the careful, sideways way that two people talk about enormous things when they are not yet sure how much weight the conversation can hold. I had said once that I was not opposed to the idea in principle, but was not ready to make it concrete. He had said that he wanted children someday, and that when I was ready, if I was ever ready, he would be there. No pressure, no agenda. He said it the way he said most significant things, quietly, and with the full weight of meaning. I had thought about it more than I admitted. I had thought about it in the months leading up to now. I had thought about the way Luther's face looked when small children appeared in public spaces, not besotted or performatively charmed, but genuinely interested. The quiet attention of someone who took people seriously, regardless of their size. I had thought about the way he had arranged our flat to have space for things that did not yet exist. How he had left a corner of the second bedroom clear, without ever explaining why. I had let myself wonder. And then, sometime in the past several weeks, I had stopped taking my suppressants. I had not told him. I had been too frightened that wanting it would make it unreal, that speaking it aloud would call in the possibility of its absence. Omegan fertility is not a guaranteed thing. I knew the statistics. I had run them in my head on more than one occasion, lying awake in the blue-dark early mornings while Luther slept beside me. I had not told him. And then my body had apparently decided to move ahead without waiting for me to work up the nerve. 3 minutes are a very long time. They are long enough to remember 2.5 years, long enough to feel the whole weight and history of a relationship settle into your chest like a stone, but a warm one, a stone made of something other than stone. Long enough to stand in a small bathroom, holding a small piece of plastic, and understand that the world is about to divide itself into a before and an after. The scent was everywhere now. I could smell it rising from my own skin, that sweet, impossible bloom, and it occurred to me that Luther had smelled it first, that his alpha senses, sharper than mine, in this specific and pointed way, had registered a change in me before the technology had. Before I had even walked to the bathroom. He had known, or suspected, the moment he came into the kitchen and breathed in the air of the same room. The thought made something move through me that was not quite grief, and not quite joy, and was entirely too large to name. I looked down. 2 lines. I had expected. I'm not sure what I expected. Some further processing time, perhaps. Some additional distance between the fact and the feeling. But there it was. 2 lines. Clear and unmistakable. As clear as the scent on my skin. As clear as the way Luther had looked at me across the kitchen this morning. My legs decided to sit on the edge of the bathtub. My body made this decision, and I went along with it. 2 lines. I pressed one hand to my mouth and the other to my stomach, and I sat there, in the early morning quiet of the bathroom, and I felt everything. Fear and joy and the staggering weight of responsibility, and a love so preemptive and so complete that it had apparently already established residency in my chest without asking permission. I felt terrified. I felt more certain of something than I had ever been of anything. I felt Luther on the other side of the door. Not literally, not with any supernatural precision, but the way you feel a person you love when they are close and waiting. The particular quality of their patience, their presence, the particular shape of their concern. I stood up. I opened the bathroom door. He was in the hallway. He had not been able to stay in the kitchen after all. He was leaning against the wall opposite the door, with his arms crossed, and his face doing something very careful and very controlled, and when I stepped out, he looked at me immediately, his eyes reading my face with the same focused attention he brought to everything. I held up the test. 2 lines. He went absolutely still for the space of 3 seconds. Then he crossed the hallway in one step and gathered me in, both arms around me, his face in my hair, and I felt him breathe in, long and slow, taking in the scent of me, the scent that had changed, the scent that was now carrying something new. He made a sound against my hair that I had never heard from him before, low and barely audible, something that lived below language, not a word, not quite a groan, something more essential than either, something that sounded like a whole person reorienting around a new fixed point. His arms tightened. I pressed my face against his chest and felt his heartbeat, which was considerably faster than his outward stillness suggested. "You knew," I said, my voice muffled by his shirt, "in the kitchen, before you even said anything." "I smelled it," he said, and his voice was rough in a completely different way than sleep this time. I didn't want to assume. I didn't know if I was. You weren't wrong. A long pause. His heart beat against my face. Chris. He pulled back just enough to look at me, his hands moving to hold my face the way they had in the kitchen, both palms curved, both thumbs moving. He looked at me for a long moment that held everything he had ever been careful not to say too quickly or too loudly. You're sure? 2 lines is fairly definitive. A breath. And I had seen Luther smile before. I had spent years watching Luther smile. I thought I had cataloged them all. A smile I had never seen. Something that started slowly and kept going, spreading across his face like sunrise, like something he had no power to contain. Something that made the scar beneath his jaw crease and his eyes go bright, and his whole face transform into something so open, so entirely unguarded, that I had to close my own eyes for a moment, because the sight of it was too much. Okay, he said. His voice shook, only slightly, but for Luther, who was the steadiest person I had ever known, slightly was enormous. Okay. I should have told you, I said. About the suppressants. I stopped taking them about a month ago. I was going to tell you. Chris. I was frightened of wanting it, of saying out loud that I wanted it. He was quiet for a moment, his hand still holding my face. I know, he said finally. I know how you are with wanting things. It was said without any criticism. Just recognition. The particular recognition of someone who has watched you closely enough to understand the shape of your fear, and loves you anyway, and does not require you to be otherwise. Are you angry? I asked. Chris. No. He pressed his forehead to mine. How could I possibly be angry right now? I breathed. He breathed. The flat was quiet around us. The birds outside were louder now, the world pulling itself into full morning. The scent of something new and irreversible moved in the air between us. I'm frightened, I admitted, quietly, into the space between our faces. Me too, he said. You don't seem frightened. I'm very frightened. I'm just also, he started again. I'm also I don't have a word for what I am, Chris. I don't think there is one. I understood that. I was running a similar deficit. We stayed home that day. This was not entirely unusual. We often stayed home on the days neither of us had obligations, moving through the flat in the easy parallel way of people who have learned to share space without crowding it. But this day was different in quality, if not in structure. The light seemed different. The air seemed different. The scent of me had settled into the rooms by now, a new layer in the atmosphere of a home that already smelled deeply of both of us. Luther made breakfast. This was his domain, and had been from early in our cohabitation. He cooked with the same focused attention he brought to everything, reading recipes the way other people read contracts, taking nothing for granted. I sat at the kitchen table and watched him move between the stovetop and the counter, and I thought about how many mornings I had sat here watching him, and what a gift it was, and how I had not always been able to fully receive it. We should make an appointment, he said, his back to me, stirring something. With a doctor, as soon as possible. I know. I can research clinics this morning if you want. Find someone good. You don't have to research everything, Luther. He turned slightly. I know I don't have to. I want to. I could see the shape of it, the way this news had activated something in him, the deep alpha drive toward providing and protecting, which he managed better than most alphas because he had spent years learning to channel it in ways that didn't annihilate the autonomy of people around him. He could feel it now, the pulse of it, the need to do something, to make something safe. I could feel it in the room. I could smell it in him, his own scent shifting slightly, taking on that focused quality. Okay, I said. Research clinics. He exhaled, and the tension in his shoulders eased a degree. He turned back to the stove. I want to tell Dane, I said. Of course. Not yet, not today. I want to sit with it today. Whatever you want. There's no rush. I watched his back. The breadth of his shoulders in the worn morning shirt. The way he moved with such contained certainty, such deliberate presence. Luther. He turned fully now, spatula still in hand. I love you, I said. Simply, without the qualifier or the hedge, or the oblique approach I still sometimes defaulted to when the feeling was too large. Just directly, just plainly. His face did the thing again, that unguarded opening, that helpless sunrise of an expression that I was apparently going to be undone by for the rest of my foreseeable life. I know, he said. And then, I love you. I love you both. Both. The word landed in my chest with a weight I was not prepared for. I pressed my hand to my stomach, the same instinctive gesture I had been making since this morning, and something rearranged itself inside me. Some internal furniture shifted. A space that had been potential became something more like actual. Both. Luther turned back to the stove, before either of us could make the moment any larger than it could hold. We ate at the kitchen table with the window open, the city waking up outside, the sounds of it coming in on warm air. I ate more than I usually did, which might have meant something or might have been the ordinary hunger of a morning after an emotionally significant event. Luther watched me eat with an attention he was trying to disguise and failing at, and I decided to give him this one because it was too endearing to correct. "Stop watching me eat," I said, not looking up. "I'm not watching you eat. You've refilled my water twice. You should stay hydrated." Luther. He looked away out the window with studied innocence. The corner of his mouth was doing something traitorous. After breakfast, we did ordinary things, because ordinary things are how you survive extraordinary ones. I answered emails. He read through a project brief. We existed in the same space in the quiet, parallel way we had spent years perfecting, and the ordinariness of it was its own kind of grace. Its own proof of everything we had built. In the afternoon, I fell asleep on the couch, which also might have meant something, since I was not typically a napper. I woke up to find that Luther had arranged a blanket over me with a carefulness that left no doubt about his current emotional state, and was sitting in the armchair nearby with his reading, and looked up when I stirred with a calm attentiveness that he immediately tried to make look casual. "How long was I asleep?" I asked. "About an hour and a half. That's unlike me." "It is," he agreed, careful, not reading anything into it aloud. I sat up and rubbed my face. The scent was still there, still that altered blooming quality, still sweeter than before. I wondered if I would always be able to smell it now, this change in myself, or if familiarity would eventually erase it. I wondered if Luther could still smell it across the room. From the way he was looking at me, yes. "Come sit with me," I said. He came and sat beside me on the couch, close enough that our shoulders touched, and I leaned into him with the easy authority of someone who has long since stopped pretending they don't need that contact. His arm came around me. His chin rested on top of my head. We sat like that in the afternoon light, and the city moved outside the window. And inside this particular room, everything was very still. "Tell me what you're thinking," he said. "I'm thinking about before." I paused. "Before I knew you. Before any of this. What about it? I spent so long being angry about what I was supposed to be. What being an Omega was supposed to mean for me. What I was supposed to want." He waited. "And then I stopped being angry and just wanted to build something I actually chose, a life I actually decided, on my own terms. And somehow that ended up including this." I pressed my hand to my stomach again, below the blanket. "Including you. Somehow what I chose, when I actually got to choose, was this." A quiet moment. His arm tightening slightly. "Is that strange?" he asked. "It's strange that it doesn't feel strange," I said. "I thought it would. I thought the moment I admitted I wanted this, I would feel like I had betrayed something, some version of myself. And I just feel like the next version of myself, the same self, but more." He pressed his lips to the top of my head, warm and slow. "That's how I feel about you," he said quietly. "Like you're always the same person, and always somehow more than I understood before." We stayed on the couch until the light changed. "I want to tell you about Luther, not the surface version, not the broad shoulders and the careful alpha presence and the devastating steadiness that I have already described. I want to tell you who he actually is, as I have come to know him over years of close attention. He reads everything. Not strategically, not for professional development, but because he is genuinely curious about almost every subject and has no patience for knowing only the surface of things. He has books on ecology, beside books on ancient mathematics, beside books on the history of salt, beside novels he reads slowly and with great seriousness. He underlines things and writes in margins and will read a passage aloud if something strikes him, with no preamble, just, "Listen to this." And then he reads it and waits to see what you think. He is bad at receiving care. This is something I discovered gradually and found quietly devastating, because he is extraordinary at providing it, and the asymmetry had clearly been present in his life for a long time before me. When he is unwell, he minimizes it. When he is tired, he works through it. When something is difficult, he processes alone before he will share any part of it. I have spent 2.5 years gently, patiently dismantling this, and I have made progress, but it is slow work. He will tell me now when something is wrong. He will not always tell me immediately, But he will tell me. He is funny. This surprises people who meet him in professional contexts where he is measured and precise. He is quietly, devastatingly funny, and he delivers humor with a perfectly straight face and precise timing. And he finds almost nothing as enjoyable as making me laugh when I am trying to maintain a position. He has weaponized this against me in several arguments, and I have never fully forgiven him for any of them. He is afraid of being too much, of taking up too much space, of his alpha nature overwhelming the people around him, of wanting too loudly or being too present. This fear was installed before me, and it runs deep, and I have seen it operate in him at the subtlest moments. The way he will begin to offer a thought and then pull it back. The way he sometimes waits to be invited into a room he has every right to enter. I call it out when I see it. I have told him approximately 40 times that being present is not the same as being overwhelming, that being wanted is allowed, that he does not have to earn the space he occupies. He is working on believing it. He is the best person I know. I say this as someone with extremely high standards and considerable experience being disappointed by people, and I say it without qualification. He is the best person I know. Not because he is perfect. He is not perfect. He has sharp edges and blind spots and a stubbornness about certain things that could outlast geological time, but because he is always genuinely trying. Because he examines himself with honesty and without cruelty. Because he has never once, in 2.5 years, made me feel small. That is not a small thing. That is, in my experience, an enormous and unusual thing. I have thought about this from his perspective, occasionally. I am not an easy person to love. I am aware of this in a factual, rather than self-pitying way. I have a temper that runs hotter than I would prefer. I am slow to ask for things and quick to resent not having them. I hold positions longer than is always warranted. I have difficulty being vulnerable without immediately fortifying myself against that vulnerability, which creates a conversational experience not unlike trying to give a gift to someone who is simultaneously unwrapping it and building a wall. I am also, and I have only recently been able to say this without irony, deeply loyal, fiercely so. When I love something, I do not know how to do it halfway. When I commit to something, it becomes load-bearing. Luther, who has been on the receiving end of this loyalty for years now, has told me that it is one of the things he loves most about me. And I have come to believe him, which took longer than it should have. He also knows that I am afraid of sentimentality, that I will often approach the most meaningful things sideways, through a deflection or a practical observation, and that the deflection is the signal, not the obstruction. He reads my deflections the way a naturalist reads tracks, the direction of travel, the depth of impression, what it says about the creature making them. He follows the tracks without commenting on them. He lets me arrive at things in my own time and from my own direction. He has never not once made me feel managed by this. He has made me feel understood. The distinction is everything. I called Dane on day 3. I had not planned to. I had planned to wait until after the first doctor's appointment, which was scheduled for the end of the week. But Dane called me first, which he did periodically to verify I was still alive and maintaining some level of human social contact. And the moment I heard his voice, I said, before I had made a conscious decision to, "I'm pregnant." The silence on his end lasted approximately 4 seconds. "I knew it," he said, at a volume that was probably startling to anyone in his immediate vicinity. "I have known something was different for 2 weeks. You have been calm in a way that is deeply suspicious." "I have not been calm. You have been weirdly, disturbingly serene. I said to Petra last week, something is going on with Chris." She agreed. "You have both been gossiping about my emotional state. We have been monitoring you with love. There is a distinction." A brief pause. "Chris, are you?" His voice changed, softened. "Are you okay? Are you happy?" I sat on the edge of the bed where I had been reading and thought about the question, not the quick version, the actual question. "Yes," I said. "Yeah? Yeah. And Luther?" "Luther cried," I said. Quietly, and he thought I couldn't tell, but I could absolutely tell. A sound from Dane's end that was somewhere between a laugh and something more moved. "Good," he said. "Good. He should cry. This is worth crying about." A pause. "In a good way. In a good way," I confirmed. "When are you telling people? When can I tell people? I am going to physically die if I can't tell people." "You cannot tell people. You must tell no one." "Chris, Dane, you may tell Petra because she is your partner and also because she will find out in the first 30 seconds anyway. No one else." A long-suffering sigh. "Fine. I mean it. I know you mean it. I will say nothing. I will carry this with great discretion and silent joy." "Thank you. You're going to be an incredible parent," he said, quietly, sincerely. "Both of you." I pressed my lips together. The backs of my eyes did something inconvenient. Thank you, I said again, smaller. Okay, I'm going to let you go, because I can hear you about to cry and you hate when I witness that. I'm not. Goodbye, Chris. He hung up. I put down the phone and sat with the feeling for a while. The particular warmth of being known by someone over a long time, of having someone in your life who has watched you become who you are, and loves you across all the versions. Luther appeared in the doorway of the bedroom. Dane, I said. I figured. He came and sat beside me. How did he take it? He claims he knew. He probably did. Luther considered. He watches you very carefully. He watches both of us. I know. I leaned against him. He put an arm around me. Easy and practiced. Luther. I want to do this right. A pause. What does right mean to you? I thought about it. The question deserved actual consideration. I want to be present for it, I said, not managing it from a distance. I don't want to be so frightened of needing things that I stand apart from this, from them. My hand found my stomach. From you, his arm tightened. You're already doing that, he said. You've been doing that. I've been trying. That's what doing it looks like. The doctor was a calm, practical person with reading glasses on a chain who took absolutely no nonsense and immediately made me feel better. The clinic was small and well organized, with a waiting area that smelled of nothing in particular, which I appreciated. Luther sat beside me in the waiting room with one hand on my knee and his face arranged in its public mode, composed, measured, present. Under the table, his knee bounced very slightly. I put my hand over his. He stilled immediately, looked at me. I did not say anything. I just kept my hand there. The confirmation took the form of numbers and measurements and a brief ultrasound that produced an image which was, if I am honest, not immediately legible as anything in particular, but which the doctor indicated was a heartbeat, and which Luther stared at with the expression of a person experiencing something they do not have the processing capacity to fully receive. Everything looks good, the doctor said, early but good. She gave us a list of things, vitamins, dietary considerations, a follow-up appointment. She spoke to both of us, which I noted with approval, not only to Luther, not deferring to the alpha in the room for the medical decisions about my own body. She gave me her answers and expected my questions and treated me as the primary patient, which I was, and which should be obvious, but sometimes is not. We walked out into gray afternoon light. Luther stopped on the pavement outside the clinic and turned his face up to the sky for a moment. I watched him, the line of his throat, the slight movement of his jaw, the contained enormity of whatever was moving through him. Okay? I asked. He lowered his face. His eyes were bright. Yeah, he said. Yeah, very much. I took his hand. We stood on the pavement in the gray afternoon, two people on the edge of something that had not existed a week ago, and now existed completely, that had been potential and was now actual, that had been a word on a test and was now also a sound, a small rapid heartbeat, a rhythm that was already its own thing, already independent, already someone. I want to go home, I said. Me too. We walked to the car. He opened the door for me, which he always did and which I had long since stopped making a philosophical issue of, because some things are worth releasing. We drove through the gray afternoon, and I watched the city through the window and thought about how the same streets could look so different, depending on what you were carrying. That night I could not sleep. This was not unusual. My sleep had been irregular for weeks, the kind of low-grade wakefulness that lives at the edge of something unresolved. But tonight it was different. Not anxious, not troubled. I lay in the dark and looked at the ceiling and felt entirely, precisely awake in a way that was not the same as sleeplessness. It was more like the way you might feel at the beginning of a long journey, too aware of the start of it to be tired. Luther was asleep beside me, actually asleep this time. I could tell by the depth and evenness of his breathing, by the total stillness of a person who has gone past the threshold. He sleeps like a man who has made peace with sleep, which is something I have always been faintly envious of. I listened to him breathe. I thought about the heartbeat we had seen today. That small, rapid, already existing pulse. I thought about the mathematics of it, not the scientific version, just the personal version. The arithmetic of two people who had found each other, who had chosen each other, who had built something together over years of ordinary days, and how somewhere in the accumulation of those ordinary days, a new thing had quietly, without announcement, come to exist. I thought about my grandmother, who had told me once that love is not the feeling, it is the choosing. The feeling comes and goes, she said. The choosing is what stays. You choose in the morning. You choose in the arguments. You choose when it is inconvenient and when you are tired and when the other person is impossible, and the choosing is the thing that makes it real. I had been choosing Luther for 2.5 years. I turned my head to look at him in the dark. I could barely see him, just the shape of him, large and still, turned toward me slightly in the way he always turned in sleep, some gravitational instinct. The line of his shoulder, the angle of his jaw, the quiet evidence of a person who was completely, entirely at rest. I had been choosing him every day without always knowing it as a choice. It had started to feel like breathing, necessary, involuntary, the thing your body does without asking your permission, because it has decided it cannot survive otherwise. I pressed my hand to my stomach, under the covers. Something in me had stopped being afraid. Not of everything. I had a detailed and itemized list of things to be afraid of, beginning with first trimester complications and continuing through all the ordinary terrors of parenthood and the specific terrors of raising someone in this complicated world. I was not naive about any of it, but the fundamental fear, the fear of wanting this, of admitting I wanted it, of needing it and needing Luther, and allowing myself to be in the full current of it, rather than watching from the bank, that fear had somewhere in the past few days quietly folded up and left. I did not know exactly when it had gone. Maybe in the kitchen, when Luther had put his hand on my face. Maybe in the hallway, when he had made that sound against my hair, that wordless, essential sound of a whole person reorganizing. Maybe at the clinic, watching him look at that small ultrasound image, like it was the most important thing he had ever seen. Maybe it was simply that I had spent so long bracing for loss that I had forgotten to notice I had already won. Luther stirred slightly, not wakened, just the small adjustments of deep sleep. His hand, which had been at his side, found mine under the covers without him opening his eyes, without any conscious navigation. Just found it, the way a body finds the familiar shape of the thing it is always reaching for. I held on. The weeks that followed were ordinary and extraordinary in equal measure. My body changed. Not dramatically at first. I was still early, still in the territory where nothing was yet visible to anyone else, where the evidence was interior and chemical and sent deep. But I felt it, a new weight in my center of gravity, a different quality to my hunger, a fatigue that arrived without warning in the mid-afternoon and departed equally without explanation. Luther noticed all of it, quietly, without commentary, without making me feel observed. He adjusted things, stocked the kitchen with the specific things I was suddenly drawn to, made sure the flat was warm in the evenings without asking if I was cold. Began accompanying me on the morning walks I had taken alone for years in a way that felt less like an intrusion and more like a weather pattern that had naturally expanded to include him. We talked more. This was something I had not fully anticipated. Not that we had been silent before, but there was a quality to the talking now, a depth and a meandering to it that felt new. We talked about everything, about our own childhoods, about what we wanted to preserve from them and what we wanted to do differently, about names, speculatively, not committing to any, just turning them in the air between us, about what kind of people we hope to be as parents, which is a conversation that requires honesty and is therefore deeply uncomfortable and absolutely necessary. I don't want to be afraid all the time, I said one evening. We were on the couch, the city dark outside, the lamp making a small warm island of light. I have a tendency to manage things from a distance when I'm afraid, to put up glass and organize things through it. He was quiet, which meant he was listening with his whole attention. I don't want to do that with them, I said. You won't, he said. You can't know that. No, he agreed, but I know how you love, when you actually let yourself. It's not managed from a distance. I thought about that. You're going to need to tell me, I said, when you see me doing it. I will. No hesitation. I don't always receive that well. I know. A pause. You receive it better than you used to. This was true. 2 years of Luther gently, patiently pointing out the glass when he could see it had done something. I had not always thanked him for it in the moment. I thanked him now. Luther, thank you for being patient with me. All of it, the whole time. A moment. Thank you for letting me, he said. Simply, meaning it completely. There came an evening when Luther's family found out. His mother arrived at the flat under the pretext of returning a book she had borrowed 3 months earlier, which was a pretext so thin that it was essentially transparent, and within 15 minutes of arrival, she had observed something about the quality of Luther's attention to me and the way I was holding my tea, and drawn her own conclusions. Chris, she said, setting down her own cup and looking at me with the particular directness she had passed along to her son. Are you? I looked at Luther. He looked back at me, a question in his eyes, checking. I gave the smallest nod. Yes, I said. She was quiet for the space of a breath, and then her face did the thing that Luther's had done, that helpless opening, that arrival of something too large for conventional expression. She reached across the table and took my hand in both of hers. You'll be a wonderful parent, she said. Both of you. I had heard this before. Dane had said it first, but somehow it landed differently this time, from someone who had known Luther for his entire life, someone who had watched him become who he was. There was authority in it. I pressed my free hand briefly to my eyes and then put it down. Thank you, I managed. Luther across the table was looking at me with that expression I kept encountering and kept being undone by, that particular soft light, that steadiness that was really a specific form of love. His mother stayed for 2 more hours and told stories about Luther as a child that I stored with extreme care. On her way out, she kissed my cheek, then went to her son and held his face in her hands the same way he held mine, and said something to him too quietly for me to hear, and he listened with his eyes closed. And when she left, there was something altered in the set of his shoulders, some ease that had arrived. I did not ask him what she said. Some things are not mine to require. Later, in bed, I reached over in the dark and took his hand. Good? I asked. Good, he confirmed. We left it there. Weeks into it now, and the scent had become the most familiar thing in the world. I could smell it on myself constantly, that sweet, warm, bloomed quality that lived in my skin, like a note added to a piece of music, deepening the chord. Luther could smell it more strongly than I could. I knew this from the way he sometimes paused when he held me close, the way his breath would slow into something deliberate, something that was paying attention. Does it bother you? I asked him once, during one of these moments. He drew back enough to look at me. The question seemed to genuinely surprise him. Bother me? He said, as if testing the words for structural integrity. Some people find it overwhelming, the pregnancy scent. He considered this for a moment with the seriousness he gave to all genuine questions. Then, it's the best thing I've ever smelled, he said. It's you, but more. It's you and something else. Something that's... He stopped. Tried again. It's like a harmony. Your scent was already... He stopped again. I'm not good at describing it. You're doing fine. It makes something in me want to, he exhaled, be very still and very present at the same time. I thought about that, the paradox of it, and how it was also exactly right. Stillness and presence as the same impulse. The impulse to pay attention to something you want to be sure you are fully experiencing. That's a good description, I said. It's the alpha instinct, he said, somewhat ruefully. The protective instinct. But it doesn't feel like an instinct. It feels like a choice, like choosing to be still, like choosing to be here. I pressed my face into his chest. I like that, I said. Yeah? Yeah. He pressed his lips to my hair. Outside, the city went about its business. Inside this particular room, in this particular flat, in the specific warmth of a life that had been built day by day, over years of ordinary choosing, we stayed very still and very present, and the scent of something new and permanent moved between us like music. I will tell you what I know about the future, which is not very much, which is also somehow fine. I know that Luther will be extraordinary at this, not because alphas are supposed to be providers or protectors or any of the static, prescribed things that designation is supposed to mean, but because he is the specific person he is, someone who takes people seriously, who is endlessly patient, who will teach by example, and by asking questions, and by being willing to be wrong and say so. He will be afraid, because he's afraid of anything he can hurt by doing it badly, and he will do it well anyway, because that is also who he is. I know that I will be better at it than I fear, and worse at it than I hope, and that this is the condition of parenthood for everyone who undertakes it thoughtfully. I know that I will have to learn to receive help. I know I am already practicing. I know Luther will help me, but by making it easier, by being someone whose help does not cost me something. I know the scent will change again. I know my body is already doing things I don't fully understand yet, shifting and preparing in ways that are ancient and biological and entirely outside my control, which I am choosing to interpret as interesting rather than alarming. I know that the small heartbeat we saw in that clinic is getting stronger every week, and that one day it will be outside me and I will see the face of whoever is attached to it, and everything I think I understand now will immediately seem like a rough draft. I know I am more than I was. I know that this is what choosing does, over time, accumulated choosing, the morning choices and the argument choices and the inconvenient choices and the tired choices and the frightened choices. The choice to stay, the choice to open, the choice to want, the choice to name the wanting instead of watching it from behind glass. I have been choosing Luther Drake for 2.5 years. I will choose him for the rest of my life. I will choose them, this small new heartbeat, this new harmony in my own scent, for the rest of my life. which is a sentence that still makes something enormous happen in my chest when I actually let myself feel it. This morning I came back from a slow walk. Luther had joined me halfway, materializing at the corner of our street in the early light with 2 coffees, 1 decaf, which he handed to me without comment because he had done the research and adjusted before I asked. And we walked the rest of the way home, side by side in the blue-gray quiet of a city not yet fully awake. At the door of our building he stopped and turned to me. "What are you thinking?" he asked. I looked at him, the dark eyes holding light, the scar beneath his jaw. The man I had met at a public planning meeting and decided to argue with, who had told me my data was better than his, who had sent a detailed data sharing agreement 2 days early and included a clause I hadn't asked for. The man who had come when I called him from a bathroom floor and brought the right chocolate and held my hand and not said anything about me crying. The man who had stood very still in a kitchen doorway one early morning and breathed in a change in the air, and known, before the test could confirm it, that something new was beginning. "I'm thinking," I said, "that you knew before I did." He smiled, the slow, full one. "I had a good nose," he said. "You had an excellent nose," I agreed. "I'm still somewhat annoyed about it." "You're not annoyed." "I'm a little annoyed." "Chris, what?" He leaned down and kissed me. Warm and unhurried, right there on the pavement, in the early morning light, the coffee going slightly cold in our hands, the city waking up around us, and not concerning itself with the 2 of us in the least. He kissed me the way he did everything, with his whole attention, with no part of him elsewhere. When he drew back, his eyes were that warm, bright thing again. "I love you," he said. "Both of us," I said. "Both of you," he confirmed. I took his hand and we went inside, and the door closed behind us, and somewhere under my skin a small new heartbeat kept its rhythm, steady and certain, requiring nothing yet except the warmth it had already found, the home it had already chosen, the 2 people on either side of it, who had been, without fully knowing it, choosing it long before it existed. It smelled like morning. It smelled like something beginning. It smelled like us. If you made it to the end, you're my kind of person. Leave a subscribe. Comment down your favorite part of the story. And if you want early access to videos, exclusive content, or just want to support the channel, hit that join button right below the video. Even 1 member genuinely means the world to me.